Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was in Hunter x Hunter and got Harem Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It had been 3 whole years since the Fourth Great Shinobi War, and while everyone was enjoying the newfound peace between nations, one man was conflicted. That man was none other than the hero of the war, Uzumaki Naruto. He wasn't conflicted about bringing peace to the nations. No, that was great. The problem stemmed from what happened after. Since he was a kid, he wanted the respect of the villagers as well as the shinobi that protected them. He wanted to be acknowledged by everyone and show them that he was more than just the container of the 9 tails. He wanted friends and people he could turn to whenever he needed them. It was for those reasons that he'd made his life goal to become the Hokage. Now though, he had all of that. Some would argue that he had most of that the moment he beat Pain and had him revive everyone he killed in the village. After the war, however, everyone knew his name and of his deeds. They heard how Team 7 had taken down Kagaya, and how he and Sasuke had broken everyone out of the infinite Tsukuyomi. The blonde had effectively carved his name in the history books already. Naruto had even beaten sense into Sasuke and had him return to the village. He'd kept his promise to Sakura and brought the man back, even though he was constantly out on long-term jobs. That left him with a problem. For the past 3 years, he had nothing to fight for. There was no one to save, no threats to the village, no animosity between Kage, no goals to strive for. There was nothing going on. They were at peace, the thing that he and Jiraiya both believed could happen, and that was great, but it left him jaded. Day after day, he waited for something to happen. Anything to alleviate his boredom, but nothing ever came. Every day was the same and he was tired of the monotony. There were only 2 things that had happened that were of any real significance. The first was having a conversation with the heiress of the Hyuga clan, Hinata, about her love confession. They never had a chance to talk about it after the Pain attack since everything happened so fast, but now that they were at peace, they were finally able to address it. He'd let her know that he was flattered, but he knew she didn't really love him. She was in love with the idea of him, and not the person. They hadn't spoken enough for her to know what he was really like, and as such formed an idea of him, especially after he stood up for her against Neji when they were younger. Hinata was saddened but understood, which he was thankful for. The second was his relationship with the Mizukage. Soon after the war ended, he traveled to each of the other nations to see what life was like for them. Now, without the animosity between them, he was free to travel between them with almost no restrictions. Throughout his time in the mist, he noticed how forward May was him. She'd compliment his looks, rub his arm here and there, and always lightly tease him whenever she could. They were soon having lunch together in her office until one day she made a move and kissed him. He had no issues with this as she was one of the most beautiful women he'd laid his eyes on. However, with her being a Kage, she couldn't up and leave her post to be with him, and likewise he wouldn't leave Konoha for another village. In the end they settled on a friends with benefits type of relationship, and he'd visit her whenever he could and they would enjoy each other's company. Naruto was sure Kakashi, who'd been appointed as Hokage shortly after the war, knew exactly what he and the Mizukage were doing, but fortunately he never said anything. Still, while having the Mizukage under him and sometimes bouncing on top of him was fun for a while, it wasn't all he was looking for. The thought of traveling had entered his head and would constantly plague his mind. Even late at night as he drew small circles with his fingers on May's back, he'd think about it. He'd been to every nation, but what about beyond the horizon? He'd asked Kakashi, but the white-haired man said no one knew. There had been some expeditions in the past, but they reported that it was just barren plains that eventually lead to the ocean. At the time, they were constantly on alert and the sensors that had gone hadn't sensed anyone for miles. It was deemed unimportant and they didn't bother heading out again since they were constantly on the lookout for enemies. That had piqued Naruto's interest. The ocean was massive. No normal shinobi would have the reserves to walk across it, but he did. Hell, since he was blessed by the sage, he could fly and expend very little chakra doing so. The blonde wanted to check it out. If it did turn out to be just water, then at least he got the idea out of his system. If his gut feeling was right, then he'd have new lands to explore and new people to meet. That sounded good. He had a feeling there was more to the world than they were aware of. That thought alone was enough to get some of his enthusiasm back. A few weeks after that conversation, after returning from a visit to May, he packed almost everything he had, minus furniture and non-necessities, into a storage seal he'd placed on one of his forearms. It took him an hour to get all his clothing, tools, and food ready. He walked out of the building and gave his apartment one final look before heading to the Hokage Tower. Kakashi saw Naruto in front of him, dressed in black pants and matching black shirt as well as some shoes similar to the ones Madara had on when he was the Jinchuriki of the 10 Tails, which were just black closed shoes that his pants were tucked into. This was a far cry from the usual orange jumpsuit he used to wear. Naruto's sensei looked at him, noticing the determined look on the young blonde's face. "So you've made up your mind?" He noted, unsurprised. He'd expected this after their last conversation. "How long do you need?" he asked. Naruto blinked. Just like that, he was expecting a little more resistance. Kakashi shrugged and leaned back in his chair. "We're at peace now, and I can always call upon Sasuke if anything happens." "Okay then. Can I have 3 years? I want to see as much as I can. If there really is nothing out there, you'll have me back within a week," he replied. Kakashi didn't answer. Instead, he pulled some papers out of the drawers of his desk and began writing. "You seem confident that there's something out there," he said as he jotted something down. "Call it a gut feeling, sensei. It's been nagging at me for a while. I know there's something." "I hope there is, Naruto," Kakashi replied with sincerity. "Have you told the Mizukage about this?" he teased, letting him know that he knew of their relationship. Naruto chuckled and scratched the back of his neck. "I let her know a few days ago. I asked her to come with me, but she was hesitant. It's understandable, she's still the Mizukage after all." Kakashi laughed along with his student and stopped writing. He pulled out a large red stamp and applied it onto the center of the paper. "Naruto, as of this moment you're not an active shinobi of Konoha. You won't be called upon for missions unless something happens that the village can't handle without you. The only thing I ask is for you to send me monthly updates through one of your toads," Kakashi said. "I can do that," Naruto replied, anxious to get going. Kakashi noticed this and waved his hand. "Go on. Enjoy yourself, Naruto. After everything you've been through, you deserve a break. Have fun." Naruto smiled. "Thanks, Kakashi-sensei. I'll see you soon." He walked down the streets of the village, taking in the sights as if it were his first time seeing them. If everything went as he expected, he wouldn't be seeing this place for a while and didn't want to forget. After he crossed the village gate and was deep within the forest, he stopped and activated his 6 paths mode. Just as he was about to head out, he stopped, as he sensed a familiar presence approaching through the trees. He tilted his head in confusion, not understanding why she was here. "May, what are you doing here?" he asked curiously. She was dressed in her usual dark blue dress, with the only change being the fact that her cage hat was missing. The auburn-haired woman smiled at his question. "You're not getting rid of me so easily," she answered happily. He finally took note of the scrolls she had clipped to her waist. Seeing the question on his lips, May continued. "Since the war ended, I've been grooming Chojuro for the position. I trained him personally and had him learn how to do the paperwork. After you told me of your plans to see what was beyond our horizons, I thought about it every night. I stepped down and had Chojuro take over. He's being guided by the advisors, but he's an intelligent man. I have no doubt he'll be a great Kage," she praised. "What if they need you?" he asked. Chojuro has instructions to reach out to Konoha and have them contact you to tell me anything important. Now that everyone's allied, it's no big deal. Naruto nodded. That made sense. He smiled widely and held his arms open. The woman wasted no time in embracing him. His body began to levitate until it was high above the trees. He turned his body southwest towards the land of wind and took off at incredible speeds. In all his excitement, he hadn't asked Kakashi what direction the last people who tried went, so he just picked a direction. It didn't matter though, eventually they'd reach the ocean and then the real journey would begin. It took the average shinobi 3 to 4 days to run from Suna to Konoha, and they'd cleared the distance in less than 2 hours at his flying speed. He'd contemplated stopping to see Gaara but ended up deciding against it, wanting to clear as much ground as he could in the day. The next 8 hours were pretty boring. What Kakashi said was partially true. He flew through flat plains with almost no life in it until finally, that changed into a strange-looking forest. Considering how long he'd flown, as well as the speeds he'd hit, he wouldn't be surprised if they were the very first people to see this place. He was fortunate that he had the ability to cover Mei in his chakra cloak as well, as he wasn't sure her body would be able to handle the speeds they were moving at. He slowed down and gently came back down towards the earth. The two shinobi landed and glanced around as they entered the forest. The trees were much larger than those around the Land of Fire. They were taller, however, and had this distinct aura around them. They almost reminded him of the Shinju, except they lacked the malevolent aura that the god tree had. Naruto closed his eyes and extended his senses as far as he could. Once he got a feel for the area, his eyes instantly snapped open. "What's wrong?" Mei asked, having seen his reaction. "There's creatures around here. Some are pretty far off, but they're huge. I'd wager some are larger than even Kurama, but not nearly as strong," he told her. "Stay on guard." The two continued walking through the dense trees, taking in the sights and keeping on guard in case anything came at them. There was just enough light left in the day that they could see, but soon, night would fall and he really didn't want to find out what kind of creatures lurked around these forests if he could avoid it. As they continued forward, both of them heard the distinct noise of flowing water. Sure enough, after making their way through more trees, they came across what appeared to be a swamp. "We're getting close to the ocean," Mei announced. Naruto turned to look at her. "When you've lived near salt water, you remember the smell," she explained. Naruto smiled. At last, it looks like they were finally about to make it. He was going to say something else but stopped as his stomach made itself known by emitting a loud growl. He coughed into his hand trying to play it off, but it didn't work as the woman broke out into a fit of giggles. "Come on, let's go on one of these branches and have a bite. I'm pretty hungry myself," she said. Naruto followed her lead and jumped up the tree, eager to have some food. Unfortunately, they didn't get to enjoy their meal. They didn't even get to unseal any food as a large serpent lunged at them from the murky waters below. The two shinobi disappeared from their spot on the branch and reappeared together on another tree across the one they'd been on. They moved just in time to see the large snake easily rip through the branch and plummet into the water. "Safe to say the animals around here aren't friendly," Naruto commented as he watched the snake slither up the tree and face them. Now that it was completely out of the water, the couple was able to get a good look at their attacker. It didn't look like any snake they'd ever seen, that was for sure. It was larger than an average snake with a large lump on its body that resembled a bell. The skin on the neck of the snake looked as if it was twisted somehow, and had two tails which had what looked to be syringes at the tips. The blonde wasn't too scared of the reptile as he'd been swallowed by one of Orochimaru's snakes when he was younger and it had been much larger. Not only was that one larger, but Manda, the snake man's boss summon, was many times larger and much scarier looking. This one just gave him an unsettling vibe. "It seems to be guarding something," Naruto heard Kurama tell him in his mind. "Down there." Naruto looked down towards the base of the tree and the area around the swamp and saw what seemed to be rice. What kind of rice grew in a swamp? He wondered. Take care of the snake and take some. It wouldn't be guarding it for no good reason. We can figure out exactly what it is later, Kurama ordered. Naruto agreed and stretched his neck slightly. I don't sense any others like it around, but stay on guard. I'm going to incapacitate it so we can get some of that rice. He said, nodding his head down below. May crossed her arms. All right, but please hurry. I haven't eaten in hours. She pleaded. He gave her a thumbs up before disappearing. In less time than it takes a person to blink, Naruto was above the giant reptile with two large chakra-constructed arms formed. The first came down on the snake's head, keeping it in place, while the other waited. As expected, the siring tails tried to stab him but were easily caught and pinned to the tree as well. Naruto got a good look at the snake up close and placed a fist on its skin. It was hard as steel. Increasing the pressure exerted by the arms, he noticed it took more force than should be required to subdue a snake, even if it was larger. He shrugged and jumped down, landing safely on the water. He picked bundle after bundle of rice and sealed it away along with everything else. He must have picked about 30 pounds of the stuff before stopping. The snake hissed at him as he did so, but it was unable to free itself from the grip his chakra arms had on it. Having what he needed, the blonde willed the arms to rip the snake off the tree, and violently shot in another direction. All right, let's go, he said, floating in front of her so she could get on. He'd rather not kill the snake if he could avoid it, so the two flew through the trees, not bothering to look around anymore, especially since it was now almost completely dark. Wait, Kurama told him. There's something else down there. Look at the base of that tree up ahead. Naruto looked around and frowned in confusion when he saw something sticking out of the ground near a tree. Luckily, it wasn't one that was inside the swamp, but it was still covered with dirt and grass. He brought them back down and walked towards it quickly, knowing the snake would be on them soon. May bent down and carefully pulled out a book. It was completely black, with no cover art of any sort, and the pages, while dirty, seemed to still be in a somewhat okay condition. Naruto took the book and gently opened it, only to find that he couldn't understand anything that was written. It seems to be a journal of some kind. Judging by where we found it, I'd say whoever owned it dropped it and left it behind. They probably met the snake. May guessed. Naruto agreed. There's only 2 words, I think, on the first page. It's probably the owner of the book, he said before an excited look appeared on his face. You know what this means? It means that there are others around. If they're not across the ocean, then they're somewhere relatively close by. His enthusiasm was contagious as May's face also broke out into a smile but was quickly able to get herself under control. That's true, but let's get out of here first and then we can get excited about it. The two didn't have to fly for very long as they quickly made it out of the forest and onto a sandy beach. The forest was miles behind them, so they didn't have to worry about the snake trying to get them again. They landed and Naruto created a small hut using an earth-style jutsu. It wasn't anything fancy like how Yamato was able to create homes, but it would be enough. He created another small structure which May lit on fire, courtesy of her lava. It would have been smart to grab some wood off the trees, but he hadn't thought of that on the count of the giant snake. The two sat side by side, finally able to enjoy some food after the long day they'd had. It's amazing, isn't it? May asked, breaking their silence. He nodded. Yeah, when I decided to set out, I didn't know what I'd come across. I don't think anyone would have guessed a swamp with a strange-looking snake would be out here. She chuckled. The two finished their food and stood up to enter the small shelter he'd created. Naruto formed the cross-shaped sign and created 4 clones of himself. You guys stand guard. I don't sense anything in our immediate area, but you never know. The 4 clones saluted him and sat facing a different direction. Naruto followed May inside and unsealed a few blankets that he laid across the slab he'd created as a bed. The two undressed until they were in boxers and bra and panties respectively and laid down, holding one another. The bed wasn't as comfortable as they were used to, but it would make do for the night. The events of the day quickly caught up with the two, more so with the blonde, and they easily let the embrace of sleep take them. The two were awake the next day at roughly 6 in the morning. They didn't have a clock to tell them, but he was able to deduce it since the sun was barely peeking over the horizon. He freed himself from May's hold and got dressed before heading outside. With but a thought, his clones disappeared and their memories were given to him. It had been an uneventful night. He was glad. He stretched and looked out to the ocean and back towards the direction of the large forest they'd been in yesterday. Now refreshed, he activated Sage mode once again and got a feel for the land. The waters were full of life, just as big as some of the creatures that he'd sensed on land. Again, nothing compared to Kurama, who, now that he had both halves of his chakra back, was even bigger and stronger than he'd been before. He floated high into the air and took a good look at the scene before him. He wondered what Kakashi and the others would say when he told them about this. In the distance he could see a large volcano, strange-looking trees, as well as one large one very far off that put the Shinju to shame. It stretched high into the darkened skies above it and he could see lightning flashing constantly. On another side of the lands he could make out what seemed to be some sort of coliseum-like structure that was made of stone or sand. He wasn't quite sure. Naruto couldn't help but think how lucky they seemed to be, as their land was seemingly far out of reach from any of the creatures they'd seen. He wasn't sure they'd be in trouble per se, as high-level shinobi would be able to make quick work of most of the creatures, but it would definitely make life more troublesome. As dark as the lands looked, it was beautiful at the same time. A light went off in his mind as he gazed at the horizon and he quickly went back down. He unsealed a blank notebook and a pen and quickly began jotting down what he'd encountered on the way. He quickly filled up 2 pages describing what he'd come across and took up another 2 pages drawing the snake he'd seen, as well as a rough sketch of the sight he'd just seen. The blonde was so caught up in trying to make a good sketch that he almost didn't notice May approaching him from behind and look over his shoulder. "I didn't know you could draw," she commented, taking in the drawing. Even she couldn't help but admit that it was an amazing sight. "I'm not an artist like Sai, but I'm decent. I just want to make sure it's accurate enough," he said, finishing up the last few touches. Once he was satisfied with the work, he closed the book and resealed it. The two cooked up a quick breakfast and soon after began stretching. "Are you ready?" Naruto asked, activating his 6 paths mode once more. May nodded and held onto him, sighing in content as the warmth of his chakra spread over her. The two began to rise higher and higher until she could see what he'd attempted to draw. Like Naruto, she couldn't help but be drawn to the large tree off in the distance. "It must be absolutely massive to look that big even from this distance," she commented. "Yeah, hopefully we can get a good look one day. Hold on tight, we're gonna go faster than yesterday," he warned. After coming across that journal, his motivation and excitement had only increased. His hunch about there being more to the world was right, and he had a good feeling that crossing the ocean, they'd find something incredible. May held on tight and let out a high-pitched squeal as they took off. Over the next few hours, the pair witnessed large sea creatures that Naruto thought might have made good summons. From their altitude they were able to make out shadows in the water that took the shape of large serpents, whales, and even giant squids. They'd seen sea animals before, but not to this degree. The closest he'd seen was the 3 tails. They were sure a few high-power jutsu would be enough to handle them, but it was still incredible to see. The ocean itself also presented a challenge apart from the gargantuan animals, and it took the form of giant waves. At one point, the seas were so choppy they actually had to increase their altitude to avoid getting hit. Naruto couldn't help but think, any regular shinobi who would venture out this far would have a tough time. If they made it to the swamp, they'd have the snake to deal with, which wasn't overly difficult, but what if it was an entire species and not a single reptile? Not only that, but the amount of chakra it would take to cross the ocean was far beyond the reserves of any normal shinobi. You know, if I didn't have the six paths ability to fly, we'd have probably turned back halfway a few hours into the journey, when everything was just flat. He commented. May nodded. Yeah, after seeing that much empty plains, I'd assume it continued that way. Conversations ceased and they continued flying well into the night. Naruto at one point repositioned Mei so she could comfortably lay down on him and sleep. With his only companion asleep, Naruto had time to think to himself. Three things bounced around in his mind. The first was the sheer size of the world. Having been flying for nearly 15 hours at the speeds they were going, and still only seeing water beneath them, it put the size of the world into perspective. If anyone were to be watching them, they'd see a bright orange flame zoom past them at breakneck speeds. Finally, after almost a full day of non-stop flying, the fatigue was beginning to set in. Sure, he had monstrous chakra reserves, but it wasn't unlimited. However, as the sun rose higher and illuminated the world, he saw it. In that instant, all the fatigue and hunger he felt instantly disappeared as he saw land up ahead. He gently nudged Mei's leg with his hand until she groggily woke up. What? She mumbled. Look, he said, pointing up ahead. Mei turned her head, and similar to him, her sleepiness disappeared. The realization that they'd made it dawned on them and they seemingly got their energy back. It only took a few more minutes of flying to reach solid land. The area was full of lush greenery and off in the distance, they could see bright lights as well as a very large tower, easily larger than any buildings they'd seen back home. Oh my, Mei trailed off as she took in the sight with wide eyes. Naruto nodded with his mouth wide open. Yeah, he looked to the left and saw regular-looking people staring at them, not having seen them fly over here. None approached though and quickly went about their business. Well? Mei asked rhetorically. Naruto shook his head from his stupor. Well, let's see what's around. I'm curious to see what things are like around here. The two followed a path that led towards the city, eager to see what the new world was like. They didn't have to walk too far to reach the city, the trip only taking them about half an hour. Upon walking down the brightly lit street, the first major revelation was made to them. Everyone in this part of the land spoke the same language as them, as they could pick up tidbits of conversation from others as they walked. They heard things from menial complaints about work, gossip, and fashion trends. There were a few other things, however, that caught both of their attention. The people here seemed to have developed very advanced forms of transportation. They had carriages back home, but these seemingly didn't require anything to power them, as far as they could see. They were much faster as well and completely made out of metal. Some of the people that walked past them seemed to be talking to their hand that was placed up close to their ear. Mei was very intrigued as to how it worked. If he was communicating instantly with someone else, that could be very beneficial back home. She made a note to look into that as soon as they had the ability to. Then came one of the most intriguing bits. Someone happened to mention that they were going to try and earn some money at a place called Heaven's Arena. Naruto wanted to know more and asked a local shop vendor what it was about. He told the man that the two were travelers who hadn't ventured out here before, and it wasn't exactly a lie. The answer he was given piqued both of their interests. Heaven's Arena was the large tower they'd seen upon arrival, and it was a place where fighters could earn money by battling their way through the first 199 floors. Any floors higher than that meant you were fighting for glory and prestige and wouldn't be awarded cash prizes. They thanked the man for the information and continued walking. We have two main problems. Mei commented as she admired the buildings. While they weren't as grandiose as Heaven's Arena, they were still well built, nicely lit, and some even had food stands that let off a wonderful aroma. First, while convenient that we speak the same language, they use an entirely different alphabet than we do. We can communicate verbally but can't write, and that'll be a problem for us. She said, lifting up one finger. And the other? Naruto asked. wondering what else she was worried about. Our money is useless here. I overheard someone use the term, Jenny, and the bills and coins don't look anything like ours. So we're going to need money fast. We need a place to stay, we haven't showered in 2 days. She explained, wrinkling her nose in disgust at the thought of not having bathed. They had the option to bathe in the ocean water, but, not knowing what could have been in it made it a bad idea. Naruto's stomach grumbled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten in almost an entire day. Hungry? Mei teased. Shut up, he grumbled, and made his way to a small bench that was nearby. He looked around to make sure no one was watching and unsealed some small bars. Handing one over to Mei, he peeled the wrapper and almost inhaled them one by one. They weren't the most fulfilling or even the best tasting, but for the moment, they would have to do. After he finished eating a few bars, he sat back and stared up at the sky for a moment before speaking. Mei, he called out to her. The auburn-haired woman glanced at him while taking a bite. Do you feel anything off about the people here? He asked, to which she nodded yes. They don't have chakra. There's something there, but it seems to be dormant. There's been a couple of people who feel slightly different. They have the same something there, but under control. Okay, so she realized it as well. Well, they seem to be okay without it, but it's still strange encountering people with no chakra when we've all been brought up believing that every living creature has it. Naruto continued to look around at the various vendors that seemed to litter the streets. Most were selling goods like clothing, furniture, food, and even things that looked like random goods. There was one that was separate from the others though. People were lined up and were presenting an item to the owner and he'd give them money. It was either a pawn shop of sorts, or he was in the buying and reselling business. Wait, he said out loud. Stay here, I'll be right back. He said as he unsealed 3 kunai from his storage seal. They weren't ordinary kunai, these were made from chakra-conductive metal, meaning they were lightweight but very sturdy. He had plenty of them, and he was sure they'd fetch a good price. They might not be able to use them for their intended purpose, but seeing as the man had accepted 4 swords already, he was sure the stall worker would go for them. He got in line and waited until he was finally up next. Good afternoon, sir. What do you have for me? The man asked. Naruto placed the 3 kunai on the countertop. The man's eyebrows raised seeing the kunai, and immediately put on some gloves to handle them, which Naruto found kind of strange. Where did you acquire these, young man? The man asked as he carefully looked over the blade. I've had them for a while now and needed some money. The man was bouncing it on his palm lightly, taking note of how light it was. Do you mind if I try to cut something with it? Naruto shrugged. He watched as the man walked a little deeper into the stall and kneeled in front of a rather large stone. He pulled his arm back and Naruto couldn't help but smirk slightly at the man's reaction when the kunai easily embedded itself into the rock. This is on the same level as a mid-era Ben's knife. He said with excitement. Naruto wasn't sure who this Ben person was, but it seemed to be a good thing. The older gentleman conducted a few stress tests to try and see how sturdy it was at the base and then attempted to tap another blade he had with it. Naruto let out a soft chuckle when the man's eyes widened after seeing his own blade be sliced as if it was butter. The blonde could see money signs appearing on the man's face and knew he would be buying. The owner of the stall tried to compose himself, but failed. The amount of money he could make off the knife was large, no doubt. All right, young man. I'll give you 3 million jenny per knife. The young shinobi remembered seeing a canned drink being sold for 150 jenny, so 9 million was probably enough to get him by for a good bit. Deal. The man took the knives, carefully wrapping them up and placing them inside a chest that he locked with 3 padlocks. Next to that he opened another one that contained multiple light-colored bills which he then counted on the countertop. They were large denominations of bills, so it didn't take too long to count. A pleasure, young man. If you have anything else you'd like to get rid of, please give me a call. He said, handing Naruto a small rectangular card with his information on it. He quickly sealed the money in a separate storage seal for easy access and headed back to May, who was looking at him curiously. The older woman raised an eyebrow at him as he sat down. So how'd it go? We got 9 million jenny out of those 3 kunai, he said smugly. May whistled. That should be enough to get us a place to stay for a while. I was worried we might have to camp out again. He shook his head. Yeah, I guess chakra conductive metal is different from what they use here. Come on, let's find a hotel and rest up. I'd like to continue looking around, but my body is screaming at me to sleep. We'll have plenty of time to look around, May said, wrapping her arm around his and beginning to walk off. The duo had been fortunate that the kunai had fetched a good price. The only hotel in the area with vacancy was a lavish-looking one that charged 200,000 jenny per night. Upon entering the room, they could see exactly why it was so expensive. They were up on the 15th floor in a room with a large panoramic window that gave them a good view of the city. It had a somewhat large black box mounted on the wall, 2 couches, a large bed with very fine sheets, and a walk-in shower. At least with the amount of luxuries provided, they could justify the large price point. The first thing they did was take a shower. Unlike back home when they showered, this time they simply let all the sweat and grime that built up over the past 2 days slide off their bodies and clean themselves. Even after they were clean, the two threw themselves onto the bed and let their bodies recover from the trip. Unknown to each other, both of them had the same thought of needing to break in both the shower and bed soon. XXXXX. A month quickly passed for the two shinobi, and their new lives only seemed to get more interesting. In that time, Naruto took it upon himself to create multiple shadow clones, which were then hanged to look like street kids, and had them go out and learn the written language. While they had a grasp of the spoken language, without someone to explain the alphabet and rules, it did them little good. In the time that his clones were out trying to find someone who would be willing to teach them, they continued to explore the city and enjoy almost everything it had to offer. They'd stopped by what the locals called shopping malls, which was a large area where goods were sold. They bought clothes, tried new delicious foods, and learned of the customs. One of the ones that stood out to him the most was that people gave their given names first instead of their family names. Something they found interesting was the fact that, as they'd suspected, the world didn't seem to have shinobi. They had other forms of military, but the shinobi system didn't exist here. The closest they had was something called hunters, which he wanted to look more into. There also seemed to be a mafia crime family issue that spread around the country, as more than once they'd heard that members of a specific mafia would be seen around the area. The way they spoke about them, though, made it seem as if they weren't too worried. May had also bought each of them something called mobile phones, which was the device he'd seen the man talking into. They were amazed at how technologically advanced the people of this part of the world were. They were able to communicate with one another instantly regardless of what part of the world they were in. The thought of the world reminded him of another discovery they had made. Naruto had bought a map of the world out of a small store near the hotel, and it only showed 6 continents. It made no mention of anything across the sea, which told them they possibly didn't know there was more. Naruto shook his head of the thought and went to finish the letter to Kakashi detailing what had happened so far when he suddenly stopped. All at once a rush of information flooded his mind. The memories of the clones returned to him, and with them, the knowledge of the language. It took them 2 weeks to find someone willing to teach street rats, and in 2 weeks he had the concept down. He smiled in satisfaction. He grabbed another sheet of paper and rewrote the same paragraph he was writing, but in the writing style of the natives here. Once he was satisfied that he had it down, he crumpled the paper and threw it in the wastebasket before finishing the letter to the Hokage. He jotted down a few more sentences along with a doodle of the sketch he had in his own book and put the paper aside. His original plan had been to go into complete detail, but now with the knowledge he was excited. What made you so happy? May asked, stepping out of the bathroom. She was dressed in a dark blue silk robe that hugged her figure nicely. It was relatively short, stopping a few inches above her knees, giving him a view of her long legs. The woman coughed twice in a sarcastic manner and snapped her fingers at him. Naruto shrugged, not at all ashamed that he'd been caught gawking at her. I got the memories back from my clones. I've got a decent grasp of the written language, which means I can use the phone and read that journal we found. He said excitedly. That's great. You can teach me after I get ready. She said, getting some supplies unsealed. Naruto didn't mind that, and unsealed the journal in an instant. He placed it over the wastebasket and tapped the front and back a few times, not wanting to make a mess on the ground. He made his way over to the small desk where he'd written his letter and opened the book. The pages were damaged, both with some water damage as well as regular weathering, but the writing for the most part was still legible on the now brownish pages. The first page simply read, Zig Zoldyck. Must be the owner of the journal, he realized. He flipped the page and continued. Today myself along with my two good friends Isaac Netero and Linny Horsderv will be embarking on a journey to the Dark Continent. It is an unofficial trip and it will take approximately 2 months for us to reach. I've heard stories of the creatures that lie beyond our sea. There are said to be creatures far stronger than we can comprehend. Similarly, there seems to be resources on the land that could greatly benefit the Zoldyck family as well as humanity as a whole. Netero claims to be on the hunt for these resources, but he can't fool me. He's looking for something or someone to challenge him, I can see it in his eyes. Having mastered Nen to such a degree, he feels like he might find an opponent here to sat his hunger for battle. While I think it is a foolish endeavor considering the danger level we've been warned of, so long as it doesn't interfere with my objective I won't say anything. I'm not sure what Linny is looking for but I'm grateful that she's coming with us. Her strength will be a valuable asset in the times to come. As for me, my main goal is to collect nitro rice, which is said to extend one's lifespan, as well as the herb for all illness, which can supposedly cure over 10,000 diseases. Isaac is calling for us. I'll document my journey as best I can. Naruto closed the book and placed it on the table. He unsealed a small bundle of rice he'd taken from the large snake in the swamp and inspected it. This is what Zig was looking for. Can it really extend your lifespan by eating it? He thought to himself. Is this the kind of stuff the world holds? That thought brought forth another. If this nitro rice really did have the properties of extending one's life, it must be worth a fortune if people were willing to risk their lives to find it. Not only that, but the journal also left him with another question. What was Nen? All right, he heard from behind him. Let's get started. He turned around to see May having finished getting ready. She'd applied a small amount of makeup and wore black skin-tight pants that the local women of the area seemed to like, as well as a loose blue top that exposed one of her shoulders. Her hairstyle remained the same however. For the next few hours Naruto went over the basics of the alphabet with her. Fortunately, May was an intelligent woman and managed to pick it up relatively quickly. The sentence structure was almost the same as theirs, only with a few minor changes, which meant it was a memorization game. By the time they stopped she had enough understanding to write her name and basic sentences. He didn't doubt that within a week or two she'd be good to go. The busty woman sat back and stretched her arms above her head. So, we have the rest of the day to ourselves. Where do you want to go? Heaven's Arena. May rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Why did I even ask? She asked herself. Naruto had made it no secret that he wanted to compete in the arena. They hadn't gotten a chance to see any of the matches since they were busy adjusting, but it was always in the back of their minds. Besides, there was sure to be some interesting people there, if not at least they'd get to see how the martial arts of this world compared to theirs. He put on some fitting black pants he'd bought at the mall at the base of the arena and threw on a black t-shirt with a dark orange stripe that went down the sleeves and side of the shirt. It was a small touch of orange but May liked it so he went with it. The walk from the hotel to the arena was only a few minutes away, probably another reason why the price for the rooms was so high. Unfortunately, it seemed a lot of people decided they wanted to participate. There were all types of people in line, from tall to short and skinny to fat. The prize money must be really good to attract this many people. The blonde tapped his foot impatiently as the line to register didn't seem to be moving. Cut that out, May whispered to him, annoyed by his inability to stand still. The blonde grumbled to himself but managed to remain still until it was finally their turn to sign up almost an hour later. They walked up to a small window and saw a young woman dressed in pink sitting in front of a computer. Another machine Naruto wanted to learn the language to use. Good afternoon, she greeted with a cheerful demeanor. Is this your first time registering with Heaven's Arena, or are you returning combatants? She asked. First time. Both answered at the same time. The young woman nodded and typed something down. A slight buzzing noise caught their attention. It seemed to be coming from beneath the young woman. They'd soon be proven right as she reached down and pulled out 2 sheets that she presented to them along with pens. These are consent forms stating you understand the risk of bodily injury. Just sign your name on the line, she instructed. They did as they were told. Perfect. You guys are set. Would you like me to give you a breakdown of how it works? If you wouldn't mind, May answered. The young woman nodded and cleared her throat. She explained that Heaven's Arena consisted of 251 floors. The first 199 did not allow the use of weapons during combat and offered monetary prizes for winning. On the first floor you were rewarded enough money for a drink. If you made it to the 50th floor you 50,000 won jenny, floor 100 granted you 1 million jenny as well as a private room, up at floor 150 you earned 10 million and a different room, and at floor 190 you 200 million won as well as a much nicer room. What about the 200th floor? Naruto asked. The woman explained to them that upon reaching the 200s you no longer won money, you were simply fighting for fame and glory. The top 21 floors were awarded to individuals who won 10 matches and earned the title of floor master. At this point weapons were permitted and if you lost 4 battles you were disqualified. On the other side however, if you won 10 matches you had the right to challenge an existing floor master for their spot and claim a floor for yourself. You have 90 days to prepare for a fight but you're allowed to fight every day if you so wish. She finished. Anything else? No, that'll be all. Thank you for the explanation. The 2 combatants made their way towards an elevator that was designated to take them to the fighting area and stepped inside. This is gonna be fun, Naruto commented, punching an open fist. XXXXXXX. You don't look like you're having fun, May teased as they rode up the elevator. Not having fun was an understatement. Both of them had managed to easily make their way up the floors, defeating every opponent in front of them with minimal effort. Most used standard taijutsu that he was sure even an academy student would be able to defeat. They'd been there for 2 hours now, and they'd spent more time waiting and riding the elevators than they had actually fighting. Cheer up, she said, giving him a peck on the cheek. We've won well over 200 million jenny each and we're heading up to the 200th floor. This is where you wanted to fight, isn't it? She asked. He nodded. Yeah, but we're not fighting today, he said as the elevator door opened. May frowned in confusion upon hearing this. Why not? Naruto was about to respond when a wave of malicious intent took over them. It wasn't powerful at all. In fact, compared to what he's faced it might as well have come from a child. The 2 turned around to see 3 men staring at them from down the hall. May couldn't help but wrinkle her nose in disgust as their eyes took in her form. She knew she was a beautiful woman and the effect she had on men, but these guys creeped her out. One wore a red cloak of some sort and didn't have legs, instead he had what seemed to be a metal pole for his lower half. The second was a man in a gray tunic of sorts sitting in a wheelchair. He had spiky hair and wore a gold headpiece that looked like some sort of helmet. The final member of their group was the creepiest of them all. He had pale skin, and slanted eyes that gave the appearance as if he was wearing a mask. He wore an ornate-looking tunic of sorts that was blue and white in color, and due to the way one sleeve was flailing, he was missing an arm. Neither of the three said anything to them, instead they simply watched as Naruto and Mei registered themselves to fight in 40 days. The woman in charge booked their dates and gave them the keys to their private rooms. Mei declined hers, instead deciding to stay with Naruto. The blonde didn't miss how the three men immediately went to the young woman and began signing up. They're hoping for an easy win. Mei deduced as they entered Naruto's room. Naruto chuckled lightly. They're in for a surprise then, aren't they? He asked rhetorically as he sat down on the bed. So are you going to tell me why we didn't fight today? Naruto unsealed the journal and held it up. I read the first entry today. This book belongs to a man named Zig Zoldyck. In it he said something about one of his friends mastering something called Nen. He explained. I'd guess what those three idiots outside did was use Nen to somehow try and intimidate us. The amount of aura here tells me not everyone is as weak as them, so it would be a bad idea to go into a battle without knowing what we're dealing with. Mei agreed with the sentiment. Even though the two of them were powerful, Naruto more so, it wouldn't do them well to underestimate anyone, especially if they used some sort of unknown power. She stood up and headed to the computer that was provided with the room. Now that she knew the basics of the language, she was sure she could do a quick search. Though they couldn't write at the time, they could still hear how stuff worked, and because of that, she knew exactly how to look something up. Using the computer really made her think of how different things back home would have been if they had this kind of technology. Zig Zoldyck, she muttered out loud as she typed the name slowly. Naruto stood behind her and stared at the screen as she worked. It says here he's the oldest living member of the Zoldyck family of assassins. They're situated in the Republic of Podokea. She read out. It even gives their exact address. Naruto took the mouse from her and input the address into another search and saw that they were situated on the opposite side of the continent they were on. It wouldn't take too long if he flew them there. You want to go find him? She asked in a knowing tone. Yeah, I think it'll be beneficial. I'm sure I can talk him into teaching us more about Nen. He said. Mei nodded and shut the computer off. Sounds good. Now why don't we go get some food and then we can come back and enjoy ourselves? She proposed in a sensual manner. Naruto couldn't have agreed faster if he tried. Things were about to get a lot more interesting for them. The blonde couldn't wait to see what this whole Nen business was about. Sleep would not come to the blonde later that night. While he was somewhat tired from standing most of the day at Heaven's Arena and having fun with the red-haired woman sleeping next to him, sleep just wouldn't take hold of him. He sat up and ran a hand through his hair. Maybe he could just stare at the ceiling until he was too tired to stay up. Naruto threw his legs off the side of the bed and put his boxers back on. Moving quietly to the desk the new room provided, he sat down and turned on the small night lamp that was on it. It wasn't too bright. The lamp shade managed to keep a good amount contained, so he didn't worry about the light bugging Mei. He unsealed Zig's journal and opened to the next page. Since he was going to try and bargain with it, he might as well compare how the man's encounters with the outside world compared to his. He tried to turn the page and frowned when some of the pages moved together. Gently, he tried to unstick the pages from each other but had to stop when one began to tear. That seemed to be the case for a good number of the pages as well, which only bummed him out further. He ignored those pages and turned to one that, while slightly smudged, was still legible. I'm beginning to think this was a grave mistake. We greatly underestimated the dangers that the Dark Continent presented. We've only been here a few days but have already had to battle for our lives against some wild creatures that roam the lands. When we reached the southeast shore of Lake Mobius, we encountered the first great threat. It was a gaseous life form that seemed to grow arms and legs. There were no recognizable features to it except the black sockets it had for eyes. The only noise it made was, "I," and while we managed to escape without being harmed, I cannot shake the feeling that something is watching me. I haven't shared my suspicions with Isaac or Linny, but I will if it's deemed necessary. Currently we're resting in a small cave near a river. We've walked well over 6 hours and haven't been attacked. We're going to eat and rest before continuing on. I don't think getting the herb to cure all is going to happen, but I'll do my best to get nitro rice for the family. Naruto stopped reading and took a deep breath. It was a brief entry. No doubt he didn't have the luxury or power to sit around as he pleased. He stopped to think about what Zig described in his entry. He hadn't seen any gas-like lifeforms. The closest thing he saw was the giant snake guarding the nitro rice. Thinking about that also brought up another thought. His people back home were very lucky that the elemental nations seemed to be so far away from any other inhabitants. Sure, they had some pretty powerful people, but some of the beasts he'd seen would definitely do some damage. That was only the larger ones too. He didn't know half of what was out there. For all he knew, some creatures might be invincible. Naruto glanced at the book again. Considering where he had found it and the condition it was in, it must have been there for a long time. I can't imagine Zig would just leave it there after going through the trouble of documenting everything. He must have had no choice. He deduced. Deciding to get back to the book, he turned the page and muttered, "Yes," when the next one wasn't stuck together. This one depicted a large amount of gas-like creatures that seemed to be staring back at you. The word, "I," was written at the very top of the page. The next few pages were stuck once again until finally he came across another entry. "The expedition is going to end sooner than anticipated. We barely made it this far without being killed. Even Isaac has accepted that he won't find what he's looking for here. There is no powerful opponent here. There are no other humans here except us. We managed to scale a cliff, and what we saw reinforced our beliefs. Insects larger than the tallest building in Lake Mobius, carnivorous plants capable of eating equally large wild creatures, and groups of deadly swarms ready to attack anything in their way. Our Nen has managed to keep us going. Some creatures see us as predators due to our aura, but the larger ones are on another level. The Hatsu necessary to survive here would need to be otherworldly. There is no victory here, no glory, only survival. Tomorrow we attempt to get nitro rice. We'll have to take a detour to avoid detection, but it's possible." Well, they definitely made it to the swamp. Naruto thought to himself. He flipped the pages but found them all empty. At the very least he knew that Zig was alive, as he was stated to be the oldest member of the Zoldyck family, but would he remember the trip? Since he picked up the journal, he'd been curious about the man's journey, and having it cut off abruptly only left him wondering. He closed the book and yawned, before sealing it away again. He crawled back into bed and closed his eyes. The meeting with the Zoldicks would hopefully sat his curiosity, and if it didn't, maybe he would look into Isaac Netero. The next day Naruto and Mei headed out towards the Zoldyck estate. Part of Naruto wanted to go on foot, so they could see more of the land, but given their time constriction he had to fly them. He did make a mental note to travel again on foot if he had the chance to take in the sights. He was only here for 3 years, and while it sounded like a long time, he knew it would pass by in the blink of an eye. It was a relatively easy trip, though he did have to be on the lookout for the airplanes that the people had created. They knew the people were advanced technologically, but the scale of the things they'd managed to create was amazing. As Mei took in the sight from above, making mental notes to visit some places, Naruto was thinking of something else entirely. Mainly, how would he initiate the conversation? Zig was an old man now. What if he was haunted by what he saw? He didn't want to say anything that might trigger some sort of panic attack. Then there was the matter of the family being assassins. He wasn't exactly scared for their safety, but would rather avoid a battle. Especially if he wanted them to teach him about Nen. He shook his head of those thoughts. While he had gotten better at making decisions based on logic, he could only do so much with what he knew. He knew they were assassins. Zig went on an unofficial trip which could perhaps have been illegal, and they could use Nen. The blonde would deal with it the way he always did. He'd figure out what to do when the time came. Soon the two saw a large volcano in the distance. the top of the mountain was tall enough that it went well into the clouds. They were close. The estate was situated at the base of the mountain, but the main entrance itself was a bit further away. Naruto lowered them back down and walked up to a small security building situated next to a large metal gate. The door to Hades. Anyone who's entered has never come out alive, Mei said, reciting something she'd read on the computer. The public certainly knows how to build suspense and intrigue. Naruto snorted in amusement and approached the man behind the glass. Excuse me. The guard looked up from his book, a look of curiosity on his face. Yes. What can I do for you? I was hoping you could tell me how to reach Zoldyck. I have something I'd like to talk to him about. Naruto replied. The gate guard's face changed from curious to serious within seconds. Putting his book down, he stood up and walked over to the phone. The man turned his back to them and put the phone up to his ear. Naruto and Mei raised an eyebrow at each other as the man spoke in a hushed whisper to someone on the other side. After a few seconds, the man hung up and turned around with an apologetic look on his face. I'm sorry, young man, but Zig-sama is currently unable to meet with you, he said. Unlike others, when he apologized, his tone had actual sincerity. Mei stepped a bit closer. Would it be too much trouble for you to call one more time? This time, tell him we know we have something that belongs to him from a trip he took a few years ago. The man's curiosity returned. They could see it in his face, but he didn't ask. Instead, he simply nodded and picked up the phone once more. The conversation was longer this time. He would shake his head, no, then mutter a few things and glance back at them occasionally. What are your names? He asked. Naruto Uzumaki. The blonde responded, remembering to give his given name first. Mei Terumi. The beauty answered. Unlike him, she seemed to still be trying to get comfortable with using her given name first. After about 5 minutes on the phone, he hung up and took off his cap and jacket, revealing a white sleeveless shirt underneath. The two inhabitants of the Dark Continent walked over to the door the man had just opened to meet him. It seems the Zoldyck family is curious as to what you possess. Unfortunately, it won't be as simple as just allowing you entry. They wish to see if you're worthy of entering the estate. Also, before I forget, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Zebro. The two bowed slightly in greeting. Zebro stood directly in between the two metal doors and glanced back at them. The official name of these doors is the Testing Gate. I should mention that each one of these doors weighs 2 tons each. When you go up a gate, the weight doubles. So here we have 4,000 pounds. They saw his body begin to glow, a thin white aura gathered around him and his body began to change. His somewhat chubby physique began to change to that of a well-built older man. He placed his palms on the doors and gave a hard push, sending the doors open. As quickly as they opened, the doors closed, letting them know that once they were in, they were trapped unless they made it all the way. So there's 256 tons in total with the 7 gates? Naruto asked, rubbing his chin. The man nodded. That is correct. Should you make it past the 7th gate, one of the butlers of the family has been instructed to take you to the main house. Also, he said quickly, there is a large guard that lives in the forest of the estate. Since you're entering through the testing gates, he won't harm you. I just don't want you to be caught off guard when you meet Mike, he warned. The two thanked him and walked up to the gate. There was no way the common person would be able to push these open. Which meant the Zoldicks were either stronger than the regular person or these were intended for Nen users as some sort of training. It was clear by Zebro's body transformation that Nen had the ability to strengthen the body, similar to how they could enhance theirs with chakra, but what else could it do? Mei placed her hands on the gates, and channeled a small amount of chakra to her arms and pushed. Zebro's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he watched the two open the door as if it was made out of paper. Just follow the path and you'll come across the next gate, he said, still in shock. Did you see the look on his face? Naruto laughed as they walked up the hill. The two laughed silently to themselves, neither worried about the animal in the woods that seemed to be watching them. Both of them had easily sensed his presence the moment they set foot in the forest, and while it was bigger than any normal animal, it was nowhere near the size of the biju. Soon, the two came across the second gate, and this time, it was Naruto's turn. Using even less chakra than Mei, he pushed the gates open. Unknown to them, the Zoldyck family as well as the butlers were watching the display through the many cameras set up around the perimeter. They'd seen people attempt to enter, and some even making it past the first 3 gates. None, however, did it with as much ease as Naruto and Mei were displaying. It took them about half an hour to make it all the way up to the final gate, which Naruto again proceeded to make light work of. Walking through the final gate, the two were greeted to the sight of a tall man in a black and white suit. He had short hair and a small goatee. "Welcome to the Zoldyck estate." The man spoke in a formal tone. "My name is Goto, one of the many butlers employed by the Zoldyck family." The two greeted back and waited for him to speak once more. "I've been instructed to take you to the family, please follow me." He said nothing more, and began walking. The walk from the gate to the house was only about 5 minutes, and after passing a nice garden, they made it to the front door. The man raised a hand without looking back and entered the large mansion. A minute later he returned and motioned them to follow him inside. "Talk about being well off," Naruto commented as they walked down the halls of the estate. Pictures of multiple people lined the halls, and valuable-looking furniture was in every room they passed. "Must get paid very well per contract," Mei responded. They arrived at a large room where 7 people were standing, seemingly waiting for them. There were multiple couches around the room, with a nice-looking table in the center. It seemed to be a conference room, or at least one where many people could gather for whatever reason. Goto bowed to the family and motioned for Mei and Naruto to sit down, which they did. That wasn't to say they had dropped their guard, far from it, but they didn't want to seem rude after being invited in. The butler soon took his leave, leaving the two alone with the famous family of assassins. The two foreigners took a second to size up the people in front of them, likewise they seemed to be doing the same thing. The tallest, and most physically built man was a blonde with long hair and wore a very dark 2-piece fighting gi that was held together by a red sash at his waist. The main thing that caught their attention was his eyes. He had a stony look on his face that was only accented further by the blue cat-like eyes. They reminded Naruto of his when he would use some of Kurama's chakra. Next to him was an older man with white hair styled upwards. He had a mustache that actually hung down his face slightly. He stood with his hands behind his back and slightly hunched forward. His pants were dark with gray straps running up and down in a diagonal pattern. He wore a dark purple sleeveless shirt with a white sign atop it that read, "A kill a day." They certainly carry themselves well, Naruto thought. Next to him was a woman in a large ornate dress and hat that gave away nothing of the figure hidden beneath. The only thing he could see was the strange glasses that had a red dot in the center. At her leg was a short black-haired child in a small kimono, staring back at him curiously. Next to him was a chubbier member with black hair wearing a pink shirt and khaki pants. Like the others, he was also on guard, but his presence wasn't as strong as the other 3 men he'd just observed. Finally, the shortest man in the group, and the one that Naruto was most curious about. He was a short bald man, his skin was wrinkled, age no doubt having taken its toll on him. He wore a jacket along with some black pants and some sandals. The man stared back at him and tilted his head, no doubt wondering what someone like him could want with him. The tall blonde walked forward. "Welcome to my family's home. I'm the head of the Zoldyck family, Silva Zoldyck. A pleasure to meet you." He greeted with a very small bow. Naruto and Mei stood up and reciprocated the gesture and recited their names, even though they were sure Zebro had told them already. "Since you made the trek up here, allow me to introduce the family before we begin." He motioned to the white-haired old man. "This is my father Zeno Zoldyck." The old man nodded. Silva went down the line of family members introducing him to his wife Kikyo, their sons Kaluto and Miluki. Then finally, the man of the hour. Zig Zoldyck. A pleasure to meet you, and thank you for taking the time to meet us. May greeted when the man was finished. Zeno sat down on a couch situated across from them and placed his hands on his knees. I am curious, what could two people as young as yourselves need with my grandfather? He asked. The other family members sat down, with the exception of Miluki, who was only present for formalities and soon after left to his room. Naruto looked at them one by one. Well, I do want to talk to him, but I'm hoping the rest of you can help me as well. Zeno and Silva raised an eyebrow at the same time. Naruto and May both saw the father-son relationship instantly. You wish to have someone assassinated? Silva asked. Naruto shook his head. Not exactly. What I'd like from you has nothing to do with assassination, but rather Nen. He revealed. Everyone in the room frowned, not in anger but rather, in confusion. Zeno cleared his throat and spoke. You don't know how to use Nen. How can that be? We can feel the aura spilling out of you two like a faucet. I'd go so far as to say you have the most raw aura I've ever felt. He said that the last part directed at the blonde. They can feel our chakra. Naruto and May thought at the same time. I was never the best at suppressing it, but I thought I was doing a good job, Naruto added. No, we don't know how to use Nen. However, I'm sure we can come to some sort of agreement, but let's leave that for later. Right now I'd like to show you something. He said. The family watched in interest as he unsealed the black journal from the seal. While nobody said anything, he didn't miss the look of intrigue on their faces as he unsealed the book. No doubt they were making a mental folder on him and gauging his abilities. Zig's usually half-lidded eyes widened when he saw the journal. Naruto held it out in front of him, and with shaky arms the eldest Zoldyck took it from him. Where did you get this? Zig asked as he looked over his old journal. Naruto could see the man lose himself in his thoughts, probably thinking back to the trip. I found it. The family looked at Zig, who was flipping through the pages, reading over his words from years ago. What is it? Zeno asked. It's my old journal that I wrote during my trip to the Dark Continent. He revealed, shocking the family. They weren't surprised that he'd been there. It was common knowledge among the Zoldyck family. What shocked them was the implications of what it meant. I had to leave it behind when we were attacked by the Hellbell trying to get nitro rice. Isaac and I were exhausted after how long we had traveled and didn't have the strength to fight and steal the rice. He explained. Naruto was glad, he didn't even have to ask him to tell him what had happened. Now he had a name to associate the giant snake with. He could guess it was called the Hellbell due to the large lump it had right at the neck. I can only think of one possible way for you to have this. Silva commented. The two of you made your way to the Dark Continent, under the V5's nose, and managed to survive. The family looked to Silva, then back to the pair, waiting for confirmation. The possibility that two people this young made it to the Dark Continent and made it back in one piece was nothing short of incredible. Naruto shook his head. Not exactly. He responded before looking back to Zig. There's a part of your journal that stuck with me. You said, there is no powerful opponent here, there are no other humans here except us. You weren't exactly right. The two shinobi didn't have to wait long before realization dawned on the family. None of the stoic-looking assassins could hide their shock this time. Sitting in front of them were the first humans claiming to be from the Dark Continent. It went against everything both the recorded expeditions to that place recorded. Zig's own experience told him that life in that place was near impossible for humans. It was almost impossible to believe that they were telling the truth. The one thing that stopped them from denying the possibility was the fact that they had Zig's journal. One that the man remembered dropping in the swamp when facing the Hellbell. You're claiming to be from the Dark Continent. How did you get here? Why? How are you alive? Zig asked. The excitement in his voice surprised the rest of the family. Zig was a mostly quiet old man who participated in assassinations from time to time, but he never showed too much outward excitement. To see him firing off questions, with excitement in his tone was strange. May cleared her throat and took over. To be honest, we didn't know that our home was part of the Dark Continent. Our land, as we discovered, was very far from any other wildlife. So far that no one had ever ventured far enough to discover any of the creatures that existed. I found myself wondering what could possibly be out there for a few years, and one day decided I was going to find out. Naruto continued. May and I made our way out and found out exactly how big the world really was. We actually encountered the hellbell you were talking about. He told Zig at the end. You encountered the beast and survived. Yeah, it was pretty tough, but nothing I couldn't handle, he said nonchalantly. The family looked at them like they'd grown a second head. Not only were they from the Dark Continent, but they spoke of one of the 5 threats as if it was a minor inconvenience. How powerful were these people? Zeno cleared his throat, getting everyone's attention. It seems this isn't a conversation that can be discussed in a short period of time. We have a job to do today, so why don't you two stay with us for tonight? I'm curious as to how your people differ from ours, and I'm sure you have questions for my grandfather. Zig nodded. Silva agreed with what his father proposed and spoke. You mentioned wanting to know about Nen, and I'm curious as to what the source of your power is, since you claim to not possess Nen. Naruto knew the man was interested in his chakra. His interest had only increased when he saw him unseal the journal. He still hadn't told them that he was in possession of nitro rice. He'd save that as a trump card in case they didn't want to teach him. Naruto planned on giving some to Zig anyway, but he wouldn't let them know that just yet. Despite the reputation they'd garnered as cold-blooded assassins, the Zoldyck family proved to be kinder than anyone could think. While Silva and Zeno left on a job, Kikyo provided them a room for the night and gave them a tour of the estate. Zig took the journal back to his room, and Naruto was certain the man was going over the entries multiple times. He could only guess what was going through the old man's head at the moment. Though the aged man hadn't said much after their initial conversation, he did say he wanted to discuss more during dinner. While Kikyo walked them through the various parts of the house, both Naruto and May sensed that something was slightly off. It had nothing to do with Kikyo, though both of them were slightly curious as to what the woman looked like without the eyepiece. No, it felt as if there was another presence in the area. It wasn't suffocating like the malice that could have been felt when Kurama was angry a few years ago. It was both kind and malevolent at the same time. It almost reminded Naruto of himself. He'd been told that his chakra was warm, but deep within one could feel the sinister aura of Kurama. The blonde focused and extended his senses. Within a second he found that it came from somewhere inside the estate. It seemed to be in one place and gave off no indication that it wanted to escape, so he didn't dwell on it. As much as he tried though, the lingering presence stayed in the back of his mind. Later that night, the entire family minus one of their children, who they'd been told was out at the moment, enjoyed a warm dinner. The food was incredible, and it was revealed that Zig had told the chefs that there were very important guests staying with them, so they made the best meals they could. Throughout the dinner, Zig recounted his experiences in detail. Naruto learned of the things he'd seen and encountered apart from the stuff in the journal. To say he was immersed in the conversation was an understatement. It was one thing to read about an experience, it was a completely different thing to hear it directly from the man who was there. Even May, who was the more level-headed of the two, was drawn into the conversations. Asking questions mostly about how they'd survived with Nen and trying to fish for information about it. While they had seen Zebro use it to enhance his body, they were certain there was more to it. They were going to learn about it anyway, but if they could get a little head start, why wouldn't they? It seemed that they had vastly different experiences out there, the main cause of that being attributed to their power. Where Naruto was certain he could survive, Zig knew that even if he was young again, his chances were slim to none. Soon the conversation shifted from Zig to Silva and Zeno. If you're the first to travel this far out, that means you've lived all your life in the Dark Continent, correct? Zeno asked, taking a bite of his food. Correct. If you don't mind us asking, how old are you two? Silva asked both of them. 20-31sts, they answered at the same time. Keep in mind we were fortunate enough that our home seemed far enough away to not get caught up with the creatures that inhabit that place. It's either that or they're staying away for another reason entirely. May added. Zeno hummed in thought. We may never know exactly why. The Dark Continent is a large place, and the things that happen are beyond comprehension. There's a reason the governments of the world have forbid traveling to the land. The survival rate is 0.04%, he revealed. Damn, Naruto muttered. It didn't seem unbelievable though. After what he'd seen, he was sure the survival rate for most shinobi of the elemental nations would also be fairly low. After dinner, Kikyo excused herself and Kaluto, leaving the two alone with the three men. Naruto-san, Mei-san. The pair looked to the eldest man of the family. I'm curious. You seem to have some sort of energy within you similar to Nen, though it feels more potent. Can you tell us about that? He asked politely. Silva nodded his head, having sensed the same thing when they arrived. Naruto glanced at Mei, who shrugged her shoulders lightly. What you're sensing is what the people of our home are born with. He put his hand out in front of them and channeled his chakra into his palm, forming a Rasengan with minimal effort. This is chakra, the combination of physical and spiritual energy given form. Letting the Rasengan disperse, he continued. The strange thing is, no one around here seems to have even a little bit in their bodies, which was strange to me since we've been told everything contained it. Your bodies have another source of energy within them spreading all over, as opposed to us who have a sort of network for it to travel through. We're both human and yet our anatomies seem to differ slightly. Zeno commented. Perhaps it's an evolutionary effect that your people needed to survive. He theorized. Probably shouldn't tell him that we were given the chakra by a goddess. He thought to himself. Still, it seemed that Kagai's reach hadn't been worldwide after all if no one here had chakra. The family seemed to have enough on their hands with them being from the Dark Continent. He didn't want to think how they would react to the existence of gods as well. Regardless, Zeno continued as he began circling around them. Even though I can sense this chakra within you, I can also tell you that you do indeed have aura nodes, meaning you can have access to Nen. Naruto could sense a but coming, and he wasn't disappointed when Silva spoke next. However, Nen isn't something that is taught lightly. In fact, most people can go their entire lives without learning of its existence. The only people who ever bother to learn it are hunters. Mei perked up at the word, having wondered about it since she heard of it. I've actually been curious about these hunters. She commented. What exactly do they do? What are they hunting? People seem to hold them in high regard. Hunters are a select group of people who have proven themselves to be elite members of society by taking an exam held by the Hunters Association. Silva began. If they pass, they're granted a license to go almost anywhere in the world and do almost anything. Naruto and Mei were both surprised. They were basically immune from consequences if granted hunter status, it seemed. Neither of them missed the key word in the man's sentence though, almost. I assume since no map of the world shows the Dark Continent, only hunters are aware of its existence. Mei asked. She'd recalled earlier how Silva mentioned that in order to go, they'd have to make it through something called the V5. The head of the Zoldyck family shook his head. Only a select group of people are aware of its existence. Even among hunters. That's also one of the places that a hunter's license doesn't grant you access to. Not only do you have permission to travel, you're also granted a vast amount of money. However, there are a few rules to being a hunter. You must always be on the hunt for something, and learning Nen is a requirement. Zeno finished. That was interesting. So the moment you became a hunter, you were pretty much set for life on the condition that you hunt something and can learn Nen. Would it be possible for you to teach us how to use Nen? Naruto asked, trying to keep the excitement from his voice down. The three Zoldyck men glanced at each other quickly, all having a mental conversation in a split second. While we're grateful to learn a bit more about the Dark Continent, and even meet inhabitants, learning Nen from us won't be free. Zeno replied with a formal tone of voice. He'd quickly switched from a curious old man wanting to know about them to the contracted killer he was. They wanted something from them and they would need to pay, just like everyone else. I'm also curious as to why. Zig commented after coughing twice. The energy we can feel from you is potent, so much so that I've only ever met one person with a presence as strong as yours. He commented, referring to Netero. If this chakra has allowed you to survive your entire life in the Dark Continent and even against the Hellbell, should that not be enough? The pair shook their heads. Before coming here we were at Heaven's Arena. We made it to the 200th floor and were greeted by three men who directed some energy at us. It was weak, but there's others there that were more powerful. May began. While we're confident in our abilities, we don't know enough about Nen to go into it blindly. The assassins understood. It was unwise to underestimate an opponent, even if you believed yourself far above them. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and that could be the end of you. I see, was all Zig said, though the pair had a feeling he wanted to say more. Naruto inwardly smirked. He knew there would be a chance that this would be the case and he was prepared. How about a trade? Silva raised an eyebrow and nodded at him to continue. You teach us Nen and the basics and in exchange I'll give you some of this. He said, unsealing 10 small bundles of nitro rice. Zig's eyes widened once more as one of his goals from his journey was held out in front of him. Nitro rice, said to expand one's life if consumed. This is what you risked your life for, isn't it? Now it's sitting right in front of you. Deal, Silva said, extending his right hand. Naruto took the offered hand and shook it with a solid grip. He did the same with Zeno and Zig and they repeated the process with May. If there was one thing Naruto respected about the men in the family, it was that they recognized May's power. Not once did they ogle her or treat her less than him. May appreciated the fact that they didn't seem to care about the 11-year age difference between the two. Back home no one would say anything but their eyes would judge. They didn't see any of that here. Naruto placed the small bundles on the table and soon a butler arrived to take the ingredients. The two did notice that he held them with extreme care, and his hunch about them being worth a lot was reinforced. Very well. We can perform the water divination test tonight and go over the 4 major principles, then tomorrow we'll begin applying them. Is that acceptable? Silva asked. The pair nodded in acceptance. Silva called for one of the butlers to bring 2 glasses full of water out, which were then placed in front of the pair. Naruto noticed them place a small leaf atop the water and wondered what purpose it served. Zeno walked around the table until he was standing behind them and spoke. Would you two mind standing up for a moment? I'm going to forcibly open your aura nodes and then we can begin. Naruto and May stood up but kept their back to the man per his instructions. They felt one of his hands on their back and then a strange sensation washed over them. A white aura surrounded them before shooting out in every direction. All 3 members of the Zoldyck family looked on in shock at how much aura was pouring out of the two. It was as if they had an endless amount. Naruto looked down at his hands to see the white aura continuously flow out of him. Likewise May also had the same issue, though output was visibly less than his. Every micropole in your body has been opened. That aura is your life energy. Zeno lectured. This is what you were sensing from the people here. The more it leaks, the more fatigued you'll become, and if enough escapes, you'll collapse. Naruto blinked. That was it. That's not so bad, May quipped, to which Naruto chuckled. If we expend all our chakra we die, so this is actually a little safer. The assassins couldn't help but wonder just what kind of life they'd lived to say that so nonchalantly. Zeno composed himself quickly and continued. Regardless, we must get it under control. Focus on keeping the aura from escaping. Close your eyes and visualize the aura flowing through your body. Naruto and Mei did as they were told, and before Zeno could continue, everything stopped. The aura diminished to a small coating around their body. It was rather simple for them. They already had a chakra network, so focusing the aura to follow the flow through the body made it easy to contain. The blonde looked at Mei, his eyes locking onto the aura that constantly hugged her. Silva didn't say anything, but his mind was racing. The amount of aura they gave off was unnatural. He knew they were powerful, but with their Nen nodes opened, they were on a completely different level. Glancing at the elder members, he could tell they were thinking something along the same lines. They'd have to make sure they were on good terms with them. Now that you have that under control, let me give you a simple overview of the 4 principles of Nen. Zeno lectured. The 4 principles are Ten, Zetsu, Ren, and Hatsu. Ten is the ability to keep your aura nodes open but keeping the flow of aura under control. It must remain flowing through the body with the nodes open so as to not leak in large quantities. You seem to already have a decent grasp of it, he commented. Mei looked at the light coating of aura around her body and spoke. So in essence we're keeping our very life force from escaping. The old man nodded. That's correct. Mastering this is what allows Nen users the gift of longevity because you're in essence hoarding your life energy. Hearing this, Naruto made a mental note not to let Orochimaru catch wind of this. Even though the snake man had seemingly turned over a new leaf, he didn't want to take any chances. If the man found out there was a way to make that immortality he had sought possible, who knows what he'd do. Glancing at his arm, Naruto wondered something. So does this act as a form of protection as well? Before they could answer, the blonde continued. 3 guys in Heaven's arena attacked us with Nen when we exited the elevator. In theory, keeping the aura around our bodies should be able to prevent anything they try from doing damage, no? This time it was Silva who answered. Correct. It can protect you from basic emotional attacks as well as physical ones to an extent. After the brief answer, Zeno continued his lecture. Next is Zetsu. Naruto resisted the urge to scoff. He hated that word due to the black mass that had caused nothing but hardship back home. Zetsu takes the application of Ten a step further to close the aura nodes and suppress your aura entirely. This will hide your aura from other Nen users and has the added benefit of getting you used to sensing the aura of others. He finished. Getting a feel for others' aura. That could be useful. I wonder if I'll be able to find out what Nen category they fall into. He thought to himself. He could already get a feel for people who used Nen, and even regular people. Maybe now he'd be able to tell which ones were more competent than others. He didn't get a chance to continue his train of thought as Zeno continued. Next is Ren. Ren focuses on using your aura in an offensive manner. One projects their aura outward, which will in turn be able to enhance your own physical abilities. Ren is also the basis for the emotional attacks we mentioned earlier. If you temper your will, you can manifest it through your Nen. It's similar to channeling chakra through the body to strengthen it. That's probably what Zebro did to open the first gate. Then tempering your will is probably what those 3 guys did at Heaven's arena. He realized. As Zeno taught them, he couldn't help but notice how many similarities Nen had to chakra. Tempering your will was also basically just letting your killing intent manifest. Finally, there is Hatsu. This is the user's expression of Nen. Your aura is given life in the form of a unique ability that usually reflects the user's personality or desires. Naturally, the technique will also reflect your natural Nen affinity, which we're about to discover. He said, motioning to the cups. The pair turned back to the cups of water and gently scooted the chairs off to the side so they could stand. Silva walked around the table and stood in front of them with his arms crossed. You'll want to put your hands on either side of the cup and use Ren. Your Nen category will be revealed based on what happens. Mei let out a large amount of aura before focusing on dialing it back a bit. What kind of reactions should we be looking for? She asked curiously. If the volume of water changes, you fall under the enhancer category. If the taste of the water changes, you're a transmuter. If impurities appear in the water, you fall under the conjuration category. If the color of the water changes, you're an emitter. If the leaf above the water moves, you're a manipulator. Finally, if something completely different happens, then you're a specialist. We'll cover what all these categories mean tomorrow, Silva assured. Naruto watched on in fascination as Mei placed her hands near the cup and let her aura flow. It took a few seconds until something happened. The water quickly changed from clear to a very dark blue. So she was an emitter. She smiled and turned to him, eager to find out what his affinity would be. Naruto followed their instructions and activated Ren as he placed his hands near the cup. Unlike Mei, his water didn't change color. In fact, none of the normal reactions happened. Instead, his leaf split down the middle and quickly sank to the bottom of the glass. Specialist, he thought to himself. Well, that settles that. Zig commented. Why don't we stop here for the night? The two of you can get used to the feeling of your aura and tomorrow we'll go over each category in detail. The pair agreed and after being denied washing their own dishes, soon made their way to the bedroom they were given. So what did you think? The men heard Naruto ask Mei as they left the kitchen. Once they were certain the pair had made it to their room, Zig broke the silence. The amount of aura those two possess is frightening. Zeno agreed with his grandfather's statement and turned to his son. We might have just created two monsters. Your thoughts, Silva? He ordered. While he was no longer the head of the family, he was still the only one who could occasionally give the man an order. Silva rubbed his chin in thought for a moment before replying. If we're ever given a contract with them as the target, it'll be refused. No amount of money is worth the effort and power it'll take to kill people of their caliber. Both former heads agreed, having had similar thoughts when Zeno opened their aura nodes. While they're polite and kind enough, my body was on edge the entire time they were in front of us. Mind you, that was before they could use Ren. Zeno commented. We'll have to form some sort of alliance with them. The two men didn't reply, instead gave him a look that said, explain. The Zoldycks have always been a neutral force in the world. We help anyone so long as they have the money to hire us, but these are two individuals we cannot risk having against us. Zig nodded and scratched his head before responding. What will we offer them? Teaching them Nen was part of a deal. Training and protection. Silva responded with no hesitation. No doubt their strength will be known soon and questions will arise. People that strong couldn't go under the radar. Silva's father closed his eyes in thought for a moment and a second question soon entered his mind. We will have to form two separate alliances. They don't appear to be married, so we aren't dealing with one entity. The head of the family shook his head. Married, no, but definitely in some sort of relationship. We'll offer them training and protection, and in the event that they stay permanently, we'll offer an official alliance between families after they wed. Zeno hummed. I suppose that could work. Why don't we dwell on this another time? I've had enough for one night. With that, the men dispersed to their rooms. Everyone had a lot on their mind. XXXXXXX. The pair ended up staying with the Zoldyck family for the next 25 days. The day following the water divination test, they'd been given the rundown on the different Nen categories and had even been offered the chance to use their training grounds. An offer that they readily agreed to. They still had plenty of time before their fight at Heaven's Arena, so they weren't too worried. The Zoldyck's offer to train them further had also come as a slight surprise considering they had required payment for teaching them Nen, but Naruto deduced they wanted to see what they could do with chakra. That was something the blonde was happy to oblige. The elemental attacks didn't seem to shock them any, considering the abilities Nen provided. He was sure they'd seen their fair share of elements. Silva and Zeno, being transmuters, both had a strong inclination to lightning, and their Hatsu reflected that. Out of all the things they saw from the pair, what caught their attention the most was their ability to walk on water and any sort of surface. It made sense, as assassins having that ability could make their jobs much easier. When Zeno went over the different categories of nen, Naruto continued to see the similarities between the two power sources. Like chakra had 5 different nature affinities, nen had 6 categories. The first was enhancement, which was the ability to strengthen yourself or objects. Transmutation was the ability to change your aura to mimic the properties of another substance. In the case of Zeno and Silva, they transmuted their aura into lightning-based attacks. Emission, which was the category Mei fell into, had the property of detaching one's aura from their own body. While others could also use it if their category was close enough, theirs would decrease in power the further their aura got from them. Mei, however, would be able to retain the strength due to it being her natural category. Manipulation was the ability to control animate or inanimate objects. The Zoldycks mentioned that their sons, Illumi and Kaluto, were both manipulators. One was taking the hunter exam and the other hadn't been around for them to see his ability. Conjuration gave one the ability to create objects from their aura. Finally, there was specialization, which gave the user a unique ability. Neither of them had begun crafting their Hatsu yet, instead focusing on familiarizing themselves with the basics and beginning to delve into the more advanced applications. 3 good examples were Gyo, In, and En. Gyo was an advanced application of Ren, where you directed aura to your eyes in order to see in Nen constructs that had been concealed within. In was an advanced application of Zetsu that rendered one's aura imperceptible, effectively concealing it. En, which was one that Naruto managed to get down easily, was the application of Ren, spreading their aura outward and using Ten at the same time to shape the aura around a certain area with the user being the epicenter. The blonde found that using En allowed him to feel the shape and movement of anything that was inside his aura. It was almost like sensors, only he'd argue this was slightly better. As a sensor one could sense chakra and movement, but with En he could basically get a clear picture or whoever was in his space. Zeno told him that he was a natural master of the application, as his En seemed to cover well over 8,000 meters. For comparison, Zeno was considered a master En user and his range only extended out 300 meters. Naruto couldn't help but think that, had the assassins been born with chakra, they'd have been elite shinobi for sure. They wasted little to no movements, they were silent, and their strikes were precise. The 2 Dark Continent natives found that out through one-on-one training. Silva had mentioned that the best way to get him used to directing his Nen for protection was through battle. Today the 2 blondes were sparring once again and Naruto's objective was to keep Gyo while continuously defending against the man's attacks. Naruto parried a punch and returned one of his own, then jumped back to create some space. They'd been sparring for the better part of an hour now and Naruto had yet to be winded. If anything, it was getting used to the sensation of using his life force to battle that he had to get used to. His aura felt lighter than chakra did, easier to use. Despite only having had access to your Nen for a few days, you seem to have a decent grasp of it. Silva commented as he walked forward. It's unfortunate that we can't help either of you with your Hatsu. We don't have any specialists or emitters in the family. Naruto waved it off and turned to see Mei training with Zeno. The old man was fast but Mei was still able to keep up, her aura quickly maneuvering to protect whatever part he was aiming for. You've done more than enough. We really appreciate the hospitality and your willingness to help us. It was nothing. The man responded. He stood beside Naruto and watched the 2 continue their training. So you're leaving today? Naruto nodded. Yeah, there's a few places we want to see before we go back to Heaven's Arena. I'll admit I'm pretty curious to see what kind of Nen abilities I'll come across. The man nodded and reached into one of his pockets. He pulled out a small card and handed it to his fellow blonde. If either of you need a place to stay or help with something, feel free to seek us out. Naruto inspected the paper and saw there were 2 different numbers on it. Those will get you in contact with my father and I directly. He clarified. Naruto carefully pocketed the paper and shook hands with the man. They stood in silence for a few minutes, content to watch the elder Zoldyck and May finish their training. Later that night the two departed, though not before once again thanking the family for their help and Zig for telling him of his travels. "We'll be at Heaven's Arena for the next couple of days if you need anything," Naruto shouted as they made their way down the mountain. The family saw them off, and to everyone's slight surprise, Zig was the first person to turn away and head back inside. When asked why he seemed to be in a rush, he answered, "I need to make a call." Nobody asked questions, as they knew there was only one other person he'd have contact with, and that was the chairman of the Hunters Association. The next 15 days were spent simply enjoying the sights while continuously practicing Nen. May had mentioned that she had an idea of what she wanted her Hatsu to be and had been studying up on how exactly it would work. He was happy for her, of course, even if she didn't tell him what it would be, but it left him wondering what he should make his be. She at least had a template of what she could do. Detach her aura, then strengthen and manipulate, since they were the two closest categories to her natural affinity. As a specialist he wasn't as restricted, but he also didn't have a basis on what he could do. "Are you ready?" May asked, breaking him from his thoughts. "You're set to fight Geto in 10 minutes. She informed him. Naruto left the thoughts of his Hatsu behind and stood up to stretch. After having sparred with Silva and Zeno, and getting a better feel for Nen, he was sure Geto wouldn't be too much of an issue. The two made their way to the arena and broke off. May gave him a peck on the lips and walked towards the waiting area for fighters. Naruto was led to the main arena by one of the judges, where he saw Geto waiting for him near the center of the ring. The man was balancing himself with his cane and seemed to be staring at him, though with those yellow eyes, he couldn't be sure. "Ladies and gentlemen, the first fight of the day will now begin between Naruto Uzumaki and Geto," one of the announcers commented through the speakers. Naruto activated Gyo and saw the aura surrounding Geto begin to travel towards his cane. "Ready. Begin." Naruto watched as the man raised his cane and placed some sort of spinning top in the center before waving a hand in front of it. That top quickly turned into 10, all spinning rapidly, that the man deployed onto the battlefield. Each top was coated with the man's aura and began to bump into each other. Naruto raised an eyebrow. This must be the man's Hatsu, he realized. The tops made their way towards him, changing their patterns as they did so. The blonde tilted his head left and then right to avoid the projectiles and dashed forward. As he expected, another top made its way towards him as he closed the gap between them. In an act that surprised Geto, Naruto raised his right hand and let the top collide with the back of it. The spinning top bounced off, having done no damage to the blonde. Naruto smirked and pulled his arm back, ready to strike. He noticed Geto's aura begin to condense around him, and within seconds, the man himself began spinning at high speeds. His punch ricocheted off and he was forced to jump back to avoid 5 tops aiming at him. Should have distributed the aura a little better, he thought to himself as he watched Geto come to a halt. He could have ended the fight quickly with a chakra-enhanced punch, but he wanted to get some more experience with his Nen. Unlike the spars with the Zoldicks, this was an actual battle, so he didn't know what kind of attacks would be coming. "As long as I can spin and my tops remain, you won't win," Geto commented smugly. No doubt he thought highly of his technique. He's the type that if his confidence is shattered, he'll bend easily. He thought to himself. He could have simply attacked with greater force and break his defense, but that wouldn't be satisfying. At that moment, Zeno's words came back to him. If he tempered his will, he could manifest it through his Nen. He smirked inwardly and closed his eyes, much to the confusion of the crowd and the annoyance of Geto, who felt like he was being disrespected. Naruto used Ren and focused on his power. The power he'd gained from training all those years, the power granted to him by the sage, and the power he'd gained from learning Nen. In one motion he let the difference in their power be shown through his Ren. Everyone in the arena felt the presence of an apex predator staring down his prey. As expected, Guido's top stopped spinning and the man's aura became uncontrolled. Gathering the aura to his arm, he disappeared and reappeared in front of the man. His fist was inches away from his face. There was no way for him to block it. Guido was punched clean in the face, hard enough for him to be tossed onto the ground, earning Naruto 1 point for a clean hit. The top-looking man got back up and instantly, Naruto was on him. He avoided the tops with little difficulty and made his way towards the man. Like last time, he began spinning, his aura protecting him from damage. This time, however, Naruto was prepared. He could tell he had multiple times as much aura as the man and as such was able to easily overpower the spinning. His hand reached forward and grabbed Guido by the face, stopping him mid-spin. A quick barrage of right and left punches followed by a knee to the gut put the man face down on the concrete. That small barrage brought his point total up to 4 for a critical hit and a knockdown. Naruto had to give the man credit for still getting back up, even though he did have trouble doing so. Naruto watched as the 10 tops quickly turned into 50 and began bouncing around, each making their way towards him as Guido retreated back. Not wanting to deal with everything again, he decided to get a little serious. He caught one of the tops in mid-air and began using it to deflect every top that tried to hit him. Seeing that he was attacking again, Guido began to spin at an even faster speed, the aura around him also increasing. Naruto did note though that while he did have more aura, it also seemed to be fluctuating. He's running low. This is a desperate maneuver, Naruto thought. He dodged top after top and chucked the one in his hand towards the man's head. Just as he thought, whether it was conscious or unconscious, Guido focused Nen towards the top half, leaving his leg unattended. Naruto used that small window to dash over and easily swipe his leg from under him. Before the man could hit the ground, Naruto used his same leg to sweep around and slam into the man's gut hard enough to leave a small crater in the concrete. One of the referees rushed over to assess the damage and saw that the human top wasn't moving. Guido is unable to continue. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. The crowd cheered loudly at the display, even though some were disappointed that they didn't see any special moves from him. Guido was moved by medical staff and the arena was being fixed for May's fight against Rahavelt. To say that the match was one-sided would be an understatement. May was easily able to dodge the man's wheelchair-based attacks. She was momentarily surprised when the man used 2 whips that were electrically charged, but even they couldn't do much. The woman was flexible, agile, faster, and stronger. He did feel slightly sorry for the guy when May speed blitzed him and forcibly tossed him out of the wheelchair. The man took 5 or so hits to the face before he hit the ground and was deemed unable to continue. He did shake his head in amusement when she bowed to the crowd as they cheered for her and blew a kiss at the camera filming. Instantly, she'd become a fan favorite. That was pretty easy, wouldn't you say? He asked as they made their way back to their room. Their next fight wasn't for a few days. Yeah, I expected something a little more, May replied. After seeing the Zoldyck techniques, these just felt a little underwhelming. Naruto was going to reply but stopped when he sensed someone up ahead. He was proven right when a man turned the corner and began walking in their direction. Unlike the 3 men they'd first met, this one was on a completely different level. Everything from the way he carried himself to the aura Naruto could see from him was different. This man was experienced and relatively powerful. His looks threw the pair off slightly though. He was a red-headed man with his hair slicked back and upwards, had pale skin and a tear and star painted on his cheeks. His black shirt had 2 symbols they recognized as card suits and wore simple black pants. He looked like some sort of clown but definitely didn't carry himself like one. The man's eyes locked onto Naruto's once he noticed them. Good afternoon, he greeted. Hello, hey, May and Naruto responded politely. The man smiled, seemingly pleased that they didn't seem scared of him like others tended to be. I watched your matches today, congratulations on your victories. Even though they aren't the strongest, to see them beaten soundly while not displaying any sort of ability was fascinating. Naruto nodded in thanks but still kept his guard up. Thanks. If you don't mind me asking, who are you? The red-haired man's eyes lit up. Hisoka. A pleasure, he said, giving them a small bow. I don't recognize you. Are you new perhaps? May answered this time. Yes. We've only just made it to the 200th floor. Technically not a lie. I see. He responded. Well, I hope to see more of your battles. Perhaps I might figure out what kind of Hatsu you two possess. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to register. He said, walking past them. Naruto and May watched the man leave and turn another corner, though not before looking back and smiling at them. May trailed off. One to look out for. He had much more aura than anyone we've met minus Silva and Zeno. Naruto finished. Are you curious? May asked as they continued walking. A little bit. We should watch his fight and see what he's about. The two made their way back to their room to celebrate their victories, unaware that Hisoka had taken just as much an interest in them as they had in him.